I'm Nick Palmachano.
And I'm Bryce Mahoney.
And we're here to introduce you to this week's Leather Talk. Leather Talk.
Leather Talk.
Leather Talk. If you want to sit on some leather and simultaneously talk about
so
something
luxurious.
we highly recommend you come on to sit with us and listen to
Matthew Morris.
Natalia Antonova.
for Leather Talk. We're serious. If somebody doesn't write us a jingle, this is just going to keep getting
it's gonna
worse
get weirder and
worse.
weirder.
Worse.
I feel like it's just escalating every time we do it.
Yeah, like it's almost like a challenge. Like, can we make it worse?
Can you rub the leather while you do it? Like
Oh
maybe you
yeah!
can get,
Oh
like,
yeah!
I like this.
some leather
You
conditioner.
were doing kegels while you were.
Yeah.
I felt like everybody was doing kegels.
I mean, it was-
I'm rubbing the leather, just not with my hands.
That's good.
No.
Yeah, keep
So
the
I'm
pelvic
happy.
floor strong.
I feel very
Oh.
underdressed for this segment. I didn't
Or
wear
overdressed.
leather. I didn't wear leather. I didn't realize this was leather.
That
was
would
such a big
actually
part.
take it to another level. Eventually, some
Somebody.
guest shows up
And
Yeah,
leather.
for
in a
Leather
leather
Talk.
ensemble.
And
Yeah,
it
it just
wasn't
gets,
me.
like,
And I'm
crazy
not
if
that
it
guest.
happens.
See, I'm disappointed, but whatever.
I believe that Matt is our first Marine. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe so.
So if anybody was going to wear leather, I would think it would be a leather neck.
Oh, so somebody technically is wearing leather on their neck.
Well, how
Good pun.
appropriate. How appropriate.
Pun, pun, pun.
Well played.
So we're happy to have you guys. We'll start talking about how I was introduced to the two of you in the first place.
Yeah,
and
I'm
that's-
interested to hear
Oh,
that
dear
story.
God.
No, there was a period of time where you played a character on Twitter that became, kind of rabidly popular called the Warax.
Yes.
And
And just so people are, it wasn't spelled like war and axe.
An axe, no.
It's W-A-R.
it was like the
A-X.
Lorax.
Yeah.
Yes, he's the
Yeah.
Warax and he speaks for all veterans.
Yeah. So talk about that. Like, where did that come from?
I thought it was going to be like one tweet at the most. Like I saw this discussion going on where, and I forget who, but this guy who had a pretty huge following tweeted, speaking for all veterans, and then he just went into like this list of things that are supposed to be true.
That was me.
Okay, so
No,
it was
I'm just
Nick.
kidding.
It was Nick.
It was definitely not.
To be
me.
clear, it was
You
Nick
can name,
Palmachano.
like, you can name
It was you.
like
I
30
never
or
used
40
that.
different
Own it.
veterans.
Right.
So this was actually happening a lot, but the one that I noticed was Nick. So he did this. It was personally him, and I thought I'm going to try
Down the
this.
story with Nick. Right.
So I created this burner account. It's, I am the Warax. I take the picture of, the Lorax standing on his tree.
Yeah.
I put a dumb hat on him and put like a beer bottle in his hand.
Yeah.
And
it
now
was-
I
it
speak
was-
for all veterans.
To be clear, it was really shittily done.
Yeah, it was
I
terrible.
mean,
It's like
this is
elementary school Photoshop. Here.
Yeah, this is not like
This is not a high,
This is
uh,
not Zach and Tom and
Yeah.
Alex doing something cool. This is like
Nope.
Microsoft.
This is
Paint.
like they've had a brain aneurysm. And
Whoa.
No, it's
You did it wrong.
better than it was like the best I could do.
Got it. Same.
I use a $1 application that you can purchase from the App Store. It's called
Okay.
UDoodle. And using that software, which is cutting edge, you too can produce the shittiest possible Warax characters. But yeah, so I made that. I thought this was going to be funny for maybe like a maximum of 5 tweets. But people really liked it. So I kept doing it. And that's the story of how that started.
So for me, because I've been on Twitter forever, I enjoy Twitter for the politics and the shit posting, basically.
That's what I'm there for.
But you were kind of the introduction to me of like this whole new subculture of veterans where it's you, it's Lady Loves Taft, it's Sergeant Jane or I Am Jane.
Sure.
But basically, like at the time, it was a host of people that were representing military veterans in an anonymous comedic role, and it kind of all happened at once. But you were the one that connected me to that. My Twitter experience was much more serious until the Warax, somehow came in. And I think it was literally like 4 or 5 posts in a row where you would just chime in on somebody that was saying something
I gotta
aggressive.
see this, guys. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like, but he was like, I speak for all veterans, and like they would come back aggressively, like, you don't speak for all vets, and he'd be like,
It's in my bio, dude.
yeah, look at my bio, dude. And like, it's like,
I just feel their heads like
and people would lose it. People would
It
lose
was very funny. I had a good time with it, you know, because it was crazy. Like the level of like just anger and like viciousness that was, well, that still is, of course, but
Hasn't changed.
it just needed to be made fun of because it was too much, and it still is too much.
And did you have a goal with it, or were you just fucking around?
I developed a goal, right? Like I was completely fucking around when I started. Like I said, I did not, like people think that I like had some plan, right?
Yeah.
Like that I sat down and was like,
I'm going to create this character.
Exactly, like,
It's
here's
going to
my-
last for this long.
yeah, and I'm going to develop an audience. And people
You're
are
a
gonna,
Marine.
people
Come
are-
on.
No, exactly. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I thought that was going to be funny for a day.
Yeah.
All right, but it resonated with people, and I enjoyed it. Like it was fun. It's a good outlet for me, and it occurred like at a time where I just retired from the Marine Corps, and I was deeply fucking unhappy about it because I didn't want to get out. Right. So I was in this place where I was really upset, and that gave me a really good outlet, like a comedic outlet for a lot of these feelings that I was having, and allowed me to connect with other people, which was good. So I enjoyed that.
So just, segueing a little bit there, one of the things that is a recurring thing for Bryce and I is we talk about the need, not just for veterans, but in particular the veteran community, to find a new mission. Because regardless of how good things might be on the surface, you might have a great job, you might have a great family, but you could still be deeply unhappy and start falling into depression.
Oh, yeah.
If there isn't something that you're working towards. And I wonder how that affected you, or looking back on that time, if this became your new mission.
Absolutely. And I don't think that, like I didn't think of it that way, right? Like I didn't sit down and think like, I am going to become the Warax, and this is like my main push, like this is what I'm all about now. But it was absolutely an outlet, right? Because I saw the way people were responding to that, and I saw that people, were reaching out to me and saying like, hey, I really appreciate what you're doing, because I thought that I was alone, and, being somebody who disagreed with some of these notions that are being put forward about like what all veterans are, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that like one of the grievances, I guess I'd say I had with the way that veterans are presented is that, like for example, that we're all combat veterans, right?
Yeah.
And like I don't know what the actual number is, but you have to realize that a very small percentage of the people who served in the military ever went to combat, right? So there isn't there isn't that connection for them. They don't understand what that is, and they feel excluded by it, right? And I think that sucks. Like I don't think that anyone should feel bad that they didn't go to combat, right? And I don't think that people should trash
But
people.
he went to combat. Wait a minute. But he went to combat.
I did go to combat,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So I mean
But it
that.
doesn't put us in this like special room that we now have access to this
Right,
club.
but
It's
it
like
but it
combat.
does, like
But
it
it
does,
does.
but it shouldn't is kind of my
No,
point,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean, it does. Yeah, you said it right. It does, but it shouldn't. So
Yeah.
it honestly puts pressure on both sides.
Yes.
You have to you have to live up to something now. And two, you have to be ashamed or feel bad.
Right, because you didn't, and that
get access
sucks.
to that.
And what really pissed me off about it is, like, I'm a Marine, right? Army, right?
Yeah.
Army, yeah.
Yep.
If we give each other shit, that's fine, right? Like inter-service rivalry, I'm here for it, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm all about it.
Sure.
What really bothers me is I start to see like people who were not in the military talking to people who aren't combat soldiers, aren't combat Marines, airmen, whatever, like they're shit because they didn't do it, right?
Sure.
And that is unacceptable to me. Like
It's also harmful because it's living in the past, and it's crapping on the accomplishments of other people. So,
Correct.
My platoon sergeant, when we, 99, 2000, when we went to Kosovo, my platoon sergeant had never deployed at that point. He had 20 or 17, 18 years in, never deployed because no one deployed.
was in the war.
But without him, that unit wouldn't have been prepared, and he wouldn't have been prepared if the previous, his mentors and then their mentors, you know, because there's a missing generation there, right? So you had Vietnam, and then you had kind of 2 generations of leaders between Vietnam, you know, that through the Cold War to when the Balkans kicked off, and then, you know, September 11th and the beginning of the Forever War, right? So there's 2 generations that, you know, unless you were in Ranger Regiment and you went to Somalia or you did Grenada or something,
You were combat.
nobody was.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when I came into the military, if you saw anybody with a combat patch, it was like, whoa, that guy's a
Yeah.
badass.
It's like a black belt in the early
Yeah,
2000s.
yeah. And so, you know, I still think about my platoon sergeant as a badass. I still think about some of the guys that, you know, and they were. And without them, we wouldn't have known what we know. And, you know, like,
And 2, it's like we're still using old mindsets to create this like extra level, because where I see it it's trickle down. So a lot of it's really heavy in the special operations community, because special operations leaders are still trained in the mindset that they need to make sure that everybody in there knows that they think that they're better than everyone else, so that they can complete that mission. Because you got to think like Colonel Puckett, the men that were in charge of the early day Rangers, they had to train them that way. Those guys needed to act that way because they were operating in such austere situations and things. But we're not in that anymore, and we now have a special operations community that could be learning from CEOs and large companies about how to be effective leaders and not use this old mindset where they have to like make people think that they're better than each other. Because that guy leaves Ranger Regiment and he goes to the 82nd with that mindset, and still acts the same way, and then now trains his leaders underneath of him to act the same way. And you know, it's thankfully I kind of feel like I see it doing a little bit of a shifting. We're getting there, but certainly not as fast as we could be, with that mindset of like that I wouldn't call it an inclusiveness, but getting away from that like that guy sucks because he's not in regiment, or he doesn't have a tab, or he hasn't been to combat. You know?
yeah, but that is, you know, that's always going to be the military a little bit, right? Like it's always going to be the military.
There's always
Right,
kind of that
it's-
aspect
sure.
of shit talking, right? There's always
Yeah.
going to be like, you know, even when I was still in the Marines, I meet a new guy. The first thing I look at is your chest, and I want to see what ribbons you have. Do you have a combat action ribbon? If you don't, like, it's going to gauge how seriously I take you. And I think that is just something that's innate to the military. And I don't think that there's specifically a problem with that, really. I think it's a problem when that's the only thing that you give a shit about, and then you are making that like the biggest part of your whole life. It's like concentrating on these things that are only meaningful in specific situations.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, and people take this 3.5 or 4 years or 12 or however many years of their life and put such an emphasis on how important that was, then they get stuck and they pull everybody else into that, and they continue to get labeled, and you know that's the perception that everyone has on them, that they just stay in that old way. You know, like a friend of mine said the other day, I posted a comment on one of mine. You know, it's like nothing worse than a '90s era Ranger. You know, like they're just so vocal about stuff, and it's funny how we take such a small fraction of time. I mean, I think back to 6 years in the military. That's all I did.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like that's such a fragment of time in relation to
It's
the
quite
rest of my
enough.
life of like all of the other things that I've done. How somebody could put that much importance on one
But
particular
it is,
aspect.
it's a defining moment. It was a defining moment in my life, but it shouldn't be the only defining moment in your life. It's a launch pad.
Yeah,
It's not the end. So
total cliche.
let's Natalia's been sitting here listening to us.
I love listening to
about
it.
That was gonna be
military.
my
I love
So-
listening to
segue.
you.
So how did you get sucked into
I guess
the
my-
Warax orbit, so to speak? Were you pre or post Axe?
Wait, what?
Did you know him before he was the Warax,
No.
or did you meet him as a result
I met
of?
him as the result of Warax, absolutely.
okay.
I slid
That was
into
gonna
his
be my
DMs
question.
with a funny video.
How she.
So you slid into
I
his,
slid
you
into
slid into
his
DM.
He would not follow me back for a long time because he thought I was a Russian spy. Which
thought
is
there was a possibility.
Crazy,
Are you
which
a
is
Russian spy?
crazy. Yeah,
You have
sure.
to. It's like the cops when
Yeah.
they ask for drugs. You have to tell us you're
Which
cops.
is-
2 more times, then it's official.
Are you a Russian
Я
spy?
сказала тебе нет.
Are you a Russian
But that's
spy?
classic, говорите мне. Я украинский шпион.
Slav, I'm gonna need
Anyway,
you to translate.
You're gonna have to translate that. Yeah. I'm not gonna make it easy for you. But no, I slid into his DMs with a funny video, and I said apologies for sliding into DMs. But here's this funny video because I wanted him to share it. And he was like, never apologize for sliding into DMs. So that's how it started.
Did he say it like that?
Twitter DMs and chill.
That was the way I pictured him saying it.
It was the intent.
It was the intent.
That's pretty strong because, Twitter is not known as a typical, it's not a high success rate for that.
No.
Because basically every woman I've ever seen on Twitter hates men. All men.
Yeah.
And they make it really
Cancel.
impossible to send
They-
messages
Why are
on
men?
Twitter.
Why are men?
Yeah, why do they
Why
exist?
are men? Yeah.
That's a super common question on
Because
Twitter.
men are terrible on Twitter. Let's face it.
Are they?
I think people are terrible on
It's true.
Twitter.
You're right.
Which is
People.
something that I would love to talk about a little bit later, I think, to talk about how polarizing Twitter is and how social
Extremely.
media in general rewards
If
the most extreme behavior from people.
100%. 100%. Twitter is all about pissing people off, and then the people you piss off overtweet you and say, look at this clown. I do it all the time. I enjoy it. And then the people that like you are like, yeah, you're so smart. You're the best. And it creates this
And then you throw the third element of the algorithms of somebody else playing puppeteer with who sees what anyways, which
Yeah.
is perpetuating, because if it was just left up to which group was the loudest, it would, there'd be
Yeah.
a whole
He
lot
was
different.
pretty loud, let's face it. So
He was pretty
I
loud.
followed him, he would not follow me back, and it was now he claims it was some long game he was playing.
Gamesmanship. Strategy.
Yeah, because I was like, who does he think he is? I'm a
Exactly.
serious journalist, and this rodent will not follow me back on Twitter. I remember being annoyed.
Yeah, it's like I said, all strategy.
Yeah, it's all strategy, yeah.
We can wait.
this rodent.
Wait for the following.
It was like a cartoon rodent on Twitter that was really funny, and I just thought, I had no intentions. I didn't realize. He did tweet like a hot guy, but I was like, probably not hot,
I'll take that compliment.
Yeah, but he tweeted like a hot guy, so I was just like, well,
Tweeted like a hot
like a
guy.
hot
I
guy.
don't even know what that means.
What does
Can you break
tweet like a
that? Can you
hot
break
guy
that
mean?
down for
Just
us?
like somebody who's very confident.
Was he like, oh,
I don't think he has.
No, just
Did
confident. Just confident.
he have the shark face,
No.
He was confident.
Is the-
I'm pretty sure most
confidence
people
in that.
do their tweeting
Is
on
the
the
shark
toilet.
face supposed to
That's
be
true.
hot?
What's that?
Is the shark face
No, it's
supposed to be
that
hot?
aggressive. I'm walking through the bar. This is my friend Jared Crane created this concept in I think 2001, where you see the guy in the bar and he's on a mission. He's not there to have fun. He's purely looking for women, and it's everything's forward.
No, that wasn't it. If he had been like that,
Like every bar in Korea.
it wouldn't have
Too
happened. It wouldn't have happened.
There's the eye movement. Be you. Be you.
But then he sent me this picture of himself with the dog, and he was like, check out this dog. Except in the picture, he was wearing no sleeves. And it was like,
Oh,
No,
that's
that's
a
a
no
that's
sleeve.
I was like, check out this
Came
dog,
in,
right?
Gave
And
her
I'm
the
like,
taste.
That's a-
I was like,
Sleeves.
that's it. I was like, he likes me because
So,
he's showing me this dog,
The
but
next
he's not
question
showing
would
me
be
the dog.
how many broken down vehicles were behind him?
Was his face?
in the yard?
Was his face in the picture?
Yeah.
Or was it the Warax
No,
face?
it was
I
his
should have
face.
photoshopped
You
that.
should
I was
have.
using my skills.
But yes, it would have gotten together much sooner. But, oh well. Yeah.
It worked out.
It worked out.
Alright.
It really did. Yeah.
So you were trying to cover him as a journalist, or you just
No.
wanted to cover him?
Cover
as a
him.
journalist?
Cover
Then
physically.
she started covering.
How dare you, sir?
How dare you, sir?
I bite my thumb at Dave.
No, I was just, I had recently left my husband, and I was just like, whatever, there's a hot guy on Twitter, it was
There you go.
He's a
That's the best time
He's a
to
cartoon lemming rat type.
With a
tweets like
finger.
a hot guy.
what happens. I dished a lot of gifts to be with them, and, some of them were still mad about it, and tweeting from
Die mad,
weird,
bro. Die mad.
weird anonymous accounts, but whatever, that's part of it, that's part of it.
So
It's part of
let's
the
talk
journey.
about your day job as a Russian spy.
I thought we already cleared
No,
up that
I
I'm
was
a
just
Ukrainian spy.
I was just-
Nuances.
Yeah.
Look, as the president
Semantics.
said, it was the Soviet
Hey.
Union, and now it's
Journalist, Russian spy, tomato.
Is there a
tomato.
difference? We don't know.
We don't know.
I watch
The
out.
world
So
may
what do,
never
you, what do
know.
you do now?
I'm the editor of Bellingcat now, so I actually, what Bellingcat does, what we do, is that we actually unmask real spies. real Russian spies. That's part of our job. We do open source investigations.
What about Ukrainian spies? Do you ever go after them?
We haven't gone after them, no, but we've definitely gone after.
Is it
we don't-
because you're racist?
I mean, against myself, probably. It's true. But it's because, about open source investigation, it's not about going after somebody, but it's just about like, oh, something happened, and there's a trail of crumbs on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And open source investigators, researchers follow that trail of crumbs. So it's not going after people. Sorry, Russian embassy, it's not going after people. Really, it is not. It is. It's just all it is just investigating what is out there. What people put on social media, for example.
Do you focus exclusively on Russia?
Oh,
or-
no. We focus on the Middle East a lot. We also do a lot of investigations now into stuff happening in the United States, because you have to, because it's a scary time in the United States. And
And these are basically, you're investigating stories that people have put out to
well, here's the
find
thing.
deeper factual information
Well,
about them.
For
Not just
example,
stories.
well, like the Christchurch shooting, for example.
Yeah.
The guy left a sizable internet footprint, right? And he
Yeah.
was on Reddit, I believe, or no, he was not on Reddit. He was on 8chan, I think. And if you look at that, if you look at all of his online activities, you can figure out how he got radicalized, what he was all about, and then we just published reports on that, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of journalists, a lot of traditional media, of course, it's currently not equipped to deal with online radicalization, especially not when it's happening far-right communities, just to give you one example. So we have a guy named Robert Evans who will sit there and analyze this stuff, and he now gets death threats, which is kind of not cool, but by people on 8chan or
Okay.
wherever,
So,
you know.
what kind of things does he come up with? So try to explain it for people that have no idea what you do. Like,
So,
give us an
Talk
example
about the
of a
MH17
success.
shoot down.
well, let's start. To give you a clearer example, MH17 is a Boeing, came down over Ukraine, over the war zone in Ukraine, a country that I do not spy for. It came down it was 2014, so it was 5 years ago, and Russia immediately started saying, oh, that wasn't us, and look, there's, look there, the aliens did it, and it was this lots of obfuscation by, the Russian foreign ministry and everybody else involved. But of course, Russia is at war in Ukraine, let's just face it. And once again, if you look at what they were putting out about the shoot down, you can analyze it and say, well, that's fake. So that's what Bellingcat did, for example. Bellingcat is very good at identifying government fakes and being
Okay.
and also they were able to determine who actually shot it down, what the missile system, how it made its way into Ukraine, who brought it in, who brought it out. So once again, based on open source information, not based on spook stuff, right? We're
Yeah.
not spies, but once again, soldiers, for example, in war zones, including a shady war zone like Ukraine, they have their phones out. They're
They're
putting
they're snapping
they're
pictures.
putting stuff, they're putting stuff out there, putting stuff on Facebook or FriendTalkTip, which is Russia's biggest social media network. And if you analyze that and if you know what to look for, you can figure out how it happened, what happened, who was involved, and the people, basically the reports put out by the joint investigation team that's investigating the shoot down and what happened there, it matches what Bellingcat came up with. So you can see
Right.
how, it's crazy.
And this isn't something new from the creation of social media or the internet. This is investigative journalism.
No,
in
it's
a sense.
it's investigative journalism, but it's not. It's different,
Okay.
because open source investigation is a very new and growing
I
and
guess
evolving field.
Because open source came around when the internet came around.
Of course,
because
otherwise you don't have the sources.
Yeah.
And
it'd be everybody writing, if everybody was journaling before the internet and leaving their journals at a
Yeah, I have to run around and pick them up and read them.
that would be
Inefficient.
Very inefficient.
for example, we
I'm trying to
train.
wrap my head around when something the necessity of this would happen.
I just want to pause right now and for all the soldiers, airmen, Marines, sailors out there and say, think about this when you're posting Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat pics, that, there is a reason why you should not do this, is because people like her will put it all together and figure out, the dumb thing that you did.
Yeah, I mean, that's
If
very
you're
true.
doing
We're
dumb
going to
things,
pause right there because we're going to change out all the batteries real quick. I think where you were going. You were about to say something
And,
poignant.
and mostly OPSEC. I think that's more of not just the dumb stuff you're doing, but does nobody care about OPSEC anymore?
It's not.
Really, they don't. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, and maybe it's like this balance of necessity or whatever. Like I follow. I'm involved with the 75th Ranger Regiment. I've started to see kind of the marketing stuff that they've come up with, and like they're seeing direct numbers in their retention and enlistments that way. So it makes sense there. But we're essentially giving the whole world a glimpse of our most elite special operations forces and everything they wear and where it is on them, and like where has it like run off now that like people could find that information now, whether we wanted them to or not. Have we gone too far already?
Well, I don't think the world's going to change. So I mean, if anything, things are going to be more available, not less available.
And they're going to be more of a need for this type of open source investigation.
Privacy is all but dead.
Privacy is dead. It's
murdered.
Privacy doesn't exist.
It's dead in a ditch.
If I'm touching my phone, if my phone's in the room, I assume it's not private.
Of course not. It records all the time. I mean, those mics
It's
are
funny
open.
how some people are like, now it's like Google or Samsung phones versus iPhones. They're like, about privacy. Or like, this phone can't hear me. Like, sorry.
Sorry, bro.
Yeah.
Listen. Yeah.
This phone is.
It listens.
You think it is or not? It is.
Clearly, they haven't watched 24. No, but it's
true.
You start talking about something, and then you open up your phone, and Amazon's like,
selling it to you.
You want to read about Bellingham? It's
like, what the hell?
It happens like instantly, and you're like, Jesus, this is ridiculous. Like but that's the future. Like I assume now, if I'm emailing, if I'm texting, if I'm having a phone call, like I assume
there is a trace of it. There will continue to always be a trace of it.
Yeah, but I think the byproduct of that too is, we're still in this middle ground between, I don't even want to say the millennial generation, more like whatever they're calling the zillennials or whatever.
Gen Z. I forget what they're called.
Yeah. So, my generation, I'm X, and it's like, we grew up in a world with privacy, and then the internet came around, and now, iPhones and Samsungs and so my generation still has like some of the hang-ups around this period of time where people could actually hide something. I think, boomers are still operating under a world where this stuff should all be, this is all private stuff. And then you have, the younger generation. And I think what that does is like, you're trying to hammer people, like in politics, for example, try to hammer people with things that they said 20 years ago. And I mean, just very candidly, like things that, my friends said or things I was involved in in the 80s when I was a kid. Like,
Perfect example. My cousin, a younger third cousin of mine, she was in a group text with a bunch of friends.
Yep.
And she had mentioned, like, it was a Friday, like, hey, I'm going to shoot the school up today, like, total joking.
Yeah.
Somebody joked, somebody didn't like, hey, I screenshot it to somebody. They like said it to a parent, and then it went out, and then that parent wanted them to send it to them, and then it became digital. And then it went on to Snapchat and just went freaking bananas on that. I mean, one text in a group of friends that then got spoke and is now online.
But even stuff like that, you understand at least, because if you don't have the context, you're going to.
It looks bad.
You have to be safe, right?
Right. Yeah,
so I get that, but I'm thinking more along the lines of, Joe Biden made a comment 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and he's getting hammered for it now. Or like someone runs for office and they're getting hit with things they said years ago, or, directors are getting slammed for things that they said in jest. Now, I'm not saying at any point that these things weren't wrong, but it wasn't too long ago that if you got caught up in, like, let's say, for example, a sex scandal from an era gone by, that you were done. You know, oh, so and so cheated on his wife in the '80s, like he can't run for office.
It's not true anymore.
Now, you know, I mean,
Now you can be
for
president.
better or for worse. Like we have a president that has, has
Sex
cheated
scandals
on,
and
cheated on
rape
all-
scandals. Let's just all sorts
all
of
his
scandals.
wives. But I mean, you know, it's. I think that what's going to happen right now, we're hitting peak wokeness, where if anybody's ever done anything wrong ever, then they're canceled. Which is, I think, is preposterous. I think we're going to hit another step where I'm not going to say nothing matters, but only the egregious things are going to matter. Because
I agree with you.
I think I'm already exhausted with
Burnout, right?
Yeah, I'm already burnt out.
It's like scandal burnout, and I hear what you're saying, because you know, like what I was thinking while you're giving these examples is people who keep getting burned for something that they tweeted when they were like 13.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's
you're an idiot.
That's
when you're
crazy.
13.
Yeah.
And I'm not insulting kids, but just
I will.
And it's even worse now because thankfully, and I say this all the time, thankfully social media wasn't around when I was a kid. Because think about how much stuff would be recorded from us.
That's
You'd
what I'm
be
saying.
canceled.
Yeah, I would have been.
We'd all be canceled.
We're all
Canceled
we're all
forever.
already canceled. It's fine. Everybody's canceled. I'm canceled. Just everybody. You know, it's just this is how the internet is, and
It's my problem with wokeness, right? Like, because the idea of being woke, and it's one of the things that I really rejected. So to swing back to the Warax character, right?
Yeah.
I got when people would write about it, right? Because there are a couple journalists who've written about progressive voices in the veteran community. They're on Twitter, but it kept being labeled as like woke vets. Like that's the handle that stuck
I actually
with it.
did that. I'm sorry. I
Is that your
apologize.
fault? Well,
It's not my fault.
Were you
I
behind-
did it. I participated in it.
Get the whole word woke.
I'm sorry.
it's not. My
It's
problem with it is
like
it's-
a next level enlightenment.
it's not anything. Like it's not anything like solid, right? Like it's not like an ideology. There's nothing connected to it. There's no like, here are my ideas and this is my like vision of the future and here's how we're going to get there.
Right.
It's just like cancel culture, right? Like looking for any kind of indiscretion or anything that you can complain about.
Anybody that I don't like,
Right.
I can find something and target it.
Can I just, in my defense, say that when I was doing a series on book vets, I did it just looking for people who are like not into Trump or else have like reservations about Trump, and it was like people from different backgrounds, and it was actually kind of a cool thing. That
But
did.
I don't think that makes a person, woke.
It doesn't. No,
That's-
it really
that's
doesn't.
political-
It's a gimmick.
Yeah.
It's a gimmick. That's what
Right.
it was. But it got people reading, and that's the other part of working in the media today, and which is why I'm glad I'm at Bellingcat because it's slightly different rules. But unfortunately, in today's media culture, if you don't have a gimmick, it's just true. People just don't care.
Don't read it.
They
And
don't.
that's the problem. It's
Well,
unfortunate.
journalism's pretty dead in the United States.
As dead as privacy, right?
Yeah.
So
And I understand how it happened, but it still bums me out.
it's really sad.
Essentially, it's no longer about getting it right, it's about getting it first.
First.
Because you need the clicks to stay in business.
And the clicks don't even keep you in business. That's the other thing.
the clicks don't even keep you in business.
Facebook
necessarily.
sucks up all that revenue.
Yes,
Google
they do.
does. You
Yes,
do not.
Yes, they do.
So,
Yep. And which is why, the scale is tipping back to YouTube right now, is because Facebook has now probably pulled too much value out. But that's a different discussion.
That's
But
a long one.
people don't realize, unless you're in business, an online business, or in journalism where you're trying to get clicks, the power of Google and Facebook. And I think that's one of the reasons why, the conversation about, do they need to have some limits on their power? Do they need to be broken up as a monopoly or coming up? Because they can stop any message they want. Mm-hmm. And they're not necessarily overt about it, but they can stop any message they want. I mean, we spend a small fortune with both of those companies. And in the old days, you used to be able to actually, you'd spend money, you'd get value back, and it was a fairly equal relationship. Like, I always felt good about spending. Now you're almost thinking about spending not in terms of, am I going to make money on this sale? But you're looking at lifetime value of the customer. Like if I introduce somebody to my brand, the average person spends this much money. And so even though I'll break even or go a little under on the first one, on average, I am going to come out a little bit ahead. And then we actually have a product that we sell. So if you're a journalist and, or a news company, you don't have the same margins of somebody that's actually making money on a product. So in order to beat Google and Facebook, you need to be more incendiary so it goes viral on its own.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's what happens. Like I get what happens, but we now live in a world where if you don't like the story, you don't have to believe it, and it's okay. And I know Fox gets hit the most with this, but it's not just Fox.
True across the board.
I mean, this is a both ways kind of thing. And I don't even know how to fix it outside of nonprofits, but then it's like, who's giving the money to the nonprofits? And then you go, well, it should be government backed. And then it's like, I used to think that, that should give us like kind of a, like the UK does a good job, of kind of subsidizing journalism in a healthy way, but I don't think America's capable of it. I think if they cracked a story about some government official, it would be like, oh, this is liberal bias or this is conservative bias or whatever. Like, so I don't even have an answer. I typically go overseas for my news.
Yeah.
Which is terrible. But I mean, like I go to BBC, I go to The Economist.
RT.
I still go to like.
Oh no, do not.
I still
No.
think the Wall Street Journal is still a pretty good source. I think that some New York Times writers are a good source, but not like it used to be.
Yeah.
The Times has always been a liberal publication, but in the 90s it was respected. Now it's like, man, like some of these articles are
Some of them are crazy. Yeah,
crazy.
It's you're writing to people who are in your silo, right? And I think that there's that's like what the concentration is. You're not looking to introduce a new idea. You're looking to like do something
I feel
incendiary.
like when the Times did the whole Nazi next door thing, they
That was
kind of
insane.
were trying to introduce a new idea. It was just a really terrible idea. So
Coming back to the original point of where you even felt that it was necessary to create, because coming back to this, like, you got to be louder than everybody else to be relevant on the social media. So therein lies the other problem where, like, why were you on Twitter? You were on Twitter because you wanted to have an outlet to deal with your anxiety, separation anxiety, depression, whatever was going on in your head about getting out of the Marines. The only way to really create that kind of ability was to create this character that was loud. It wasn't the fact that you couldn't just reach out as a normal person and be.
No one would have cared.
Nobody would have cared.
No one would have cared, and they would have just blasted you.
Yeah. Or even in that silo, you would have been ostracized. You pussy, which happens all the time. We play this like reaching out's a sign of strength. Okay, I'm reaching out. Well, why the fuck are you reaching out?
Weak.
Yeah, and you're like,
Yeah, what do you do with that?
And
right?
so that's an even bigger issue that people, we've perpetuated this thing now that you actually have to create some uniqueness or some loud voice to even be heard.
We have a real problem in the veteran community where, just like what you were saying, where we eat our own. Where we talk this big game about, like, I've got your back, bro, no matter what. Ask, for example, veterans who are women, if they feel like we have their backs. And I think that, like, overwhelmingly, you're gonna hear no, right? Because especially, like, in real life, face to face, right? May be different. On the internet,
I can say definitively, no. Like, we do not have their back.
No, it's really interesting because I appreciate my female classmates at West Point a lot more now as an older person than I did when we were in school together. And I've had this conversation with a few of them. When I went to West Point, I was there from 94 to 98. I wouldn't say, it definitely wasn't at that time anti-women the way it was in the 70s or early 80s. But, the place very much is you're expected to be physical. You're expected to be, good at sports, push-ups, road marching, all that stuff. And like you do gauge, just like in an infantry unit, there's a pecking order associated with your physical fitness. And when I think about my classmates, like they were incredibly physically fit women, but the fact that they couldn't do, some of them couldn't do the same things that like I could, some of the other guys could, you looked at them differently. Like you were like, and not overtly, like at no point was I like, did we sit around and have a conversation like, you're not as much.
Right.
But you definitely, that stigma definitely existed. Now, when, I served, like you were saying, I was in for West Point plus 6 years, right? Like this tiny fraction of a moment. Some of my classmates are now pinning on colonel, and these women have had these like intense jobs, and they've been in combat for years, and they've done all these things, and you're like man, you had to live through, like West Point was probably one of the more tolerant places in the Army in terms of that, so that like what they probably had to grind through.
Ugh.
And they're out there doing kick-ass jobs, like it changes your perspective. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm soft about like the role that people should have. I think, for example, the infantry should have a standard, and I don't care if only 2% of all women can qualify on that standard. Like it is not important to me that an infantry unit is diverse, but it is important to me that if you're badass enough to hit that standard, that you get to play.
Yeah.
And that's how like, that's probably a fine line, but there's a difference between prioritizing mission and prioritizing diversity. There's also a difference in making an arbitrary standard just for the hell of it. I had guys that were terrible. They were not physically fit.
Right.
They couldn't run. They couldn't do push-ups, but they were still in the unit because they hit these bare minimums. But, like just very on, and I'm not saying this like in a bad way, but like I probably could have, idiot choked them to death. Like just, I'm going to kill you with this non-skillful thing. And like, is that an infantryman? I don't know, right? Like,
I mean, according to the standards, yes.
According to the standards,
you know what I'm saying?
I do.
Whereas,
I do.
you have,
it's a strange thing.
you
It's
have-
a weird
you
game.
have
to
women
play.
that person that is barely maintaining the standard is taking a place where a potentially higher earning standard woman could be on that team and be more of an asset. But because that man is there and barely meeting the standard, that woman doesn't even get a
Can I
chance.
get on my spy shit for just a second?
yes,
Yeah, you
let's
can.
talk spy
Yeah,
shit.
just this is related to what we're discussing. Let's just and people might get freak out at me about this, but let's learn from the Soviets for a second, who in World War II.
Learn from the Soviets, she says.
In World War II,
Yeah.
there were a lot of women, Soviet women, who served honorably and who like died for their country in
Sure.
World War II. And if we could maybe just like take a look at that and say, women are perfectly fucking capable of serving their
Of
country.
murdering people.
And
Oh yeah,
murdering
no, we all
people.
believe that.
Yeah, like there were great Soviet female snipers. There was a really famous Soviet female tanker, by the way. And cheers to that. And obviously the night witches, the women who flew missions, attack planes for the Soviet Union. So let's just like, I understand that if for a lot of people in this country, for various reasons, we
Just
think
don't like
that
the idea of women serving.
it's a bit weird. But you know what? Honestly, if the goddamn Soviets can do it, if they could do it in the worst war in human history, maybe we can also figure out ways to.
Well, I mean, it's happening.
Yeah,
it's
exactly,
happening,
exactly.
and it's not going backwards, and it's no different than anything else. I think most of the people that I know, the chief concern is not, should women be in this unit? And the interesting
Should
thing
we
is
put them together? I think
that's a
a-
different question.
Yeah.
That's a different question. But the question that I hear most often, including from women, is just very simply, they don't want the government to get involved and change the standard. They want the standard to be the standard. Now, whatever we decide that standard is, but there should be a high standard for somebody that is expected to be able to go, hand to hand through a building and maybe have to kill somebody. Like, I don't want, and I don't think anybody wants, somebody dying because somebody wasn't physically strong enough to do whatever.
Yeah, I mean,
And I think that's, so, like, here's the standard. Whoever gets over this bar,
and I feel like that, like, something that needs to be done in those particular realms is not only gender now essentially needs to be removed from any type of grading or visible marking system. There.
So you bring up a valid point, right? So if we are doing this, then should there be a male versus female fitness test?
I don't think so.
Yeah. And for that matter, like, do you need to be able to run? I don't even know what it is now, but do you need to be able to run a 7-minute mile for 2-3 miles if you're going to be a pack clerk?
That's another interesting question. When looking at like cyber command and stuff like that, looking at all of the people we exclude who could be brilliant and really do very well in those jobs, and we won't take them because
they don't meet the physical standards.
Because
soldier.
Exactly, in a job will never are they going to have to pick up a rifle and shoot somebody.
If they do, things have gone so wrong.
Yeah, like we lost already.
We lost.
So at this point,
If the cyber guys gotta get out there and start slinging bullets.
If Larry from S1 has to grab his M4, things are in trouble.
Yeah.
or his like
Things have
circa
gone south
1983
long
Beretta. Like,
time.
I've got this.
Long time.
No,
yeah, I mean, I think the whole gender aspect of our military is a very polarizing topic right now.
If you're infantry, if you're armor, if you're FA, like, you need to be a physical specimen regardless of, like, that's what I think. I would love to see actually a higher standard.
I agree with that.
In those areas, and everybody else, like, let's lower the standard so smart weirdos can join
Do the job
and beat the crap out of Chinese and Russian hackers, because we're getting our ass kicked.
That's it.
Absolutely.
So you start this personality. You think it's going to be a flash in the pan. It turns out to be something else. So you let it ride for a little while, but
We're bringing it back.
Bring it back. Yeah. Let's talk about Warax.
Ultimately, it's not really what you want it to be. So where does Warax go from there?
It just got to a point where I was feeling burned out by it and pulled in a direction that I wasn't comfortable with, because I think that this moment that we're in right now, doesn't really
right
allow
now?
right now,
Okay.
right now, like the
Like,
current,
like sitting here,
the current
This
here.
leather
in this room,
moment.
in this room, that we're
leather
in.
moment.
Sitting on
in this
luxurious
country,
leather.
in this country, on
It's
our
comfortable,
thrones
isn't
of
it? It's a,
luxurious
it's a
leather.
comfortable leather
It's
couch.
a beautiful leather couch.
Yeah,
It really
that's
is. I might take it with me when I leave. I don't know. We'll see.
You take that
We'll
one.
see. I'll put it through the window and I'll pull the car around up top. I've got a
Right.
bike rack, so I think it'll fit. But no, in this moment, right, we're very divided, right? There isn't a lot of room for middle ground, and I picked like a character that I was trying to do satire and kind of make fun of that.
Yeah.
But the longer I did it,
You
I
got
guess-
labeled. You got labeled.
yeah. So I end up being
I
like.
feel like Lorax is it's Pat of the whole character thing. So
No, he got labeled very quickly as almost an extreme leftist kind of fighting arm. Mm-hmm. And truth be told, I don't really know your politics, and I'm not even asking.
I'm not like that far left, and that's
yeah.
one of the things that is funny to me. Is people like assumed that I'm like a revolutionary communist,
Yeah.
right? And for the record, I'm not, right? Like,
Sure, just like
Deny,
For the
she's
record,
Trying to
I'll say it 2 more
deny.
times, right? I'm not a communist. I'm not a communist.
Yeah.
So now it's official, but no, I'm really not. Like I think that education's good. Like I think we
Yeah.
should go to school. I think that there should be social welfare programs. I agree
Healthcare
with
would
that.
be great,
Healthcare's
yeah.
nice. I think that people should have healthcare. But when you get into stuff like there are people who I interact with who think that there shouldn't be such a thing as police, and that there shouldn't be such a thing as the U.S. military. That's insane. Like that is like if that's an idea that you have and you're outside of high school, like that's really strange, right? And I think that can only come from a place of extreme privilege that has no, like no tracking of of what it's really like in
Of
the world.
reality,
Right.
yeah, like-
Because if there are no police, guess what? People are going to come take your shit.
I'm gonna thrive. I'll be fine.
Great.
Yeah, that's will
I'll
probably
be
be
fine.
okay.
Like,
you don't
there's-
have to.
there's no
I like
like-
your stuff. I'm taking
We're
that.
banding together. We're building a compound.
That's right.
We're gonna kill everyone else.
I already
And
know where
then
that
there it
compound is. We don't need to build it. I've already got that in mind.
Duke has some really nice buildings. So look, they've got good
Yeah.
fields of fire. You know,
North
like-
Carolina Outward Bound
Excellent.
School, Linville Gorge, North Carolina. It's isolated. It's up on a major
Well, don't
hilltop.
tell them where you're going. I mean, like, it's important that we have the idea, but now you're telling them where we're going to be.
You're ruining it.
Yeah, you got
We're gonna pause for. So going back to abandoning the Warax character, I liken it to when Luke Skywalker became a Jedi, but then became disheartened by it after he totally screwed up one of his students.
Completely correct. I mean, that's where it was. There I was standing over one of my woke veteran friends about to slay him. And then I realized, like, I had become, what I opposed. No, it was something I got fucking bored with it is really the main part. Because it was not funny to me anymore. Like, I felt like the joke had gone as far as it possibly could have.
Yep.
And that if I kept doing it, it would become less and less and less funny. So it was like important to me just to end it, right?
Yeah.
And I also didn't want to just do dick jokes forever, right? Because dick jokes are funny. Like, I still laugh at that.
I get it. There's
Right.
always a
I
time and a
love
place.
a good dick joke.
A good joke. Everyone loves a good dick joke. But
A good
a good dick joke.
jick joke.
Let's be good.
good.
Let's be good.
Good.
So it was, time for that to end. And I wanted to be able to talk about like actual serious subject matter, right? And that's like where the podcast came in. So we had the idea to do this podcast together. It's like me, U.S. military veteran, her, like a journalist and an immigrant to this country. And we thought that, together, aka Russian, Ukrainian spy, who knows? And I'll tell you, I've been accused of being a Russian spy too.
Oh,
You
yeah,
guys-
he
you guys know that?
has.
Sure.
He has.
She's indoctrinated you.
Well, it's somebody.
That's what I thought
Somebody. Yeah, somebody's running this, but.
So it's always the
That's-
woman, Shosha la femme.
It
I'm
is-
like
I mean,
Yoko Ono
it is,
here.
though. Right? I mean, it pretty much is.
I guess.
Yeah.
I'll just take it as a compliment.
You're the Yoko Ono of the Warax.
I will
destroyed
take-
the Beatles.
I will
No,
take it
and-
as a goddamn
And this is an
compliment.
actual thing. I know you're not on Twitter, but this is.
I'm on the twit.
Are you?
On the
Yeah.
tweets?
I didn't even know you were on Twitter.
I'm on Twitter.
Do you follow me?
I do.
Do you follow me on
website.
Twitter?
I believe so.
Fucking better.
Say
Imagine if you
something
didn't
so I
follow.
can follow you back on the rare occasion when you're tweeting something.
Yeah.
Set the notifications up.
We're not even on Twitter together. That's messed up.
That's a, is it you just
Yeah.
a real
It's
partnership?
it's a real thing that happened where when he stopped being the Warax, people called her the Yoko Ono of the Warax. Like
This is true. People are
they
mad.
ruined it, and they're mad at him because he's not doing it anymore. And he's like, when I did that, I was unhappy and I was lashing out. I'm now happy, and they're like,
How dare you be
I don't
happy?
care.
Yeah, but like, we
Which
like,
is-
we like suicidal war apps. You know, like we
But
went
it's a
angry.
real thing where people become invested in who they think you are. And there's a danger, with social media, you create a character, right? I've been on social media now for 13 years. So 13 years ago, man, I was a different person.
Yes.
When I started,
so.
when I started Ranger Up, I was 29. I was just out of the military.
See his
Like
jawbones.
just finished grad school. They're coming back. They're coming back.
They're beautiful.
No, I was a different person, and living a different life, and more parties and more funny stories and more we were always at we were at fights all the time. It was like a wilder time. I don't want to and refuse to pretend to be somebody different. So over the course of the years, we've created different content. And some of the content is still just as silly as it's ever been, but some of the content is serious. And you still get people that are like, man, I miss when you used to do whatever. Or people that get mad because, BNN is a middle of the road program. The whole idea is to criticize and provide our best. I'm not saying I never will say right, but our best interpretation of what is happening. Because of the problem we talked about previously where you can't trust anybody. So like our team here, me, Matt, Tom, like we sit down and we try to kind of take apart stories and figure out like what's really happening here. And sometimes that means we're sticking up for President Trump because he's gotten blasted for something that
Canceled.
you know,
Yeah,
that he
I've
didn't
just
do.
canceled you. I'm sorry.
And that's
now
fine.
I am taking this couch.
And sometimes, you know, and oftentimes we're blasting him for doing things that are, you know, by most standards inappropriate or, you know, or we think, you know, is not in the best interest of the country. Whenever we do that, you know, interestingly, most of our fans are like, this is a good take. I feel like this is an honest take. Or they'll be like, I see what you're saying, but I think this, which I also appreciate. But there's always this small minority of people that are like, you're a piece of crap. This is the best president ever. Or you're a piece of crap. This is the worst president ever, and you're garbage for sticking up for him. Even though we're like, this is the truth. We've uncovered like what actually happened here, and it had nothing to do with President Trump. It's like, well, screw you. It's, you know, like whatever it is. But people get so passionate, and then they bite on something, and then they never let go. Tim Kennedy, who's one of the owners of the company with me, did a sit down on, is it Tim Ferriss's show, right? I think it was Tim Ferriss's show. And there, you know, Tim is the biggest Second Amendment guy. And we've said this before, so I don't want to beat a dead horse, but like, I think what I said last time is if Tim could transform into a gun, he would happily do it. But he made a comment once, like Tim Ferriss was like, you know, why do 21-year-olds need to have assault rifles? And again, the term assault rifle, we know what the media talks about. They're talking about M4s, they're talking about AK-47s, AR-15s, whatever. Why does a 21-year-old need to have an assault rifle? And Tim Ferriss is extremely liberal, and Tim is trying to kind of like create a bridge and have conversations. And he was like, I don't know, maybe they don't. Let's talk about it. And just like that comment, like, and Tim he's not anti-21-year-olds having an AR, but just that comment, because he was trying to like actually have a conversation about why or why not. People didn't listen to the context. They didn't listen to the whole conversation.
As soon as they heard that.
That blurb got passed everywhere. And now anytime we post anything with Tim, who is like the representative of every gun imaginable, like he works with gun companies, ammo companies, whatever. It's like, oh yeah, you know, doesn't really believe in the Second Amendment, thinks 21-year-olds shouldn't have, like this one soundbite. And what I found over the years is I've done 50, 60 things that have pissed people off in the last 13 years. And if you let yourself feel like it's the end of the world, you get bogged down and you think social media is reality. But what you have to do is just blast through it. I blast through. Like, oh, somebody hates me because of this, fine. If I think I did something wrong, literally, like if I feel it, if I'm like, you know what, now that I've assessed what people are saying, then I will correct it.
Do you follow Terry Crews on Twitter?
I do follow Terry Crews
So
on
Terry
Twitter.
Crews, he said something once that is basically goes to your point, and I found a lot of solace in that, was when he said, you know, like he could just put out a tweet saying like, hey, human beings need exercise, right? And then there's gonna be a bunch of people who just be like, well, I can't exercise, or like, well, my kids are injured and they don't like exercise,
Feel
or
bad for
like,
me.
or exercise is whatever. It's like, do better, Terry Crews. And it's like, I think that when he said that, I was like, yeah. Like this is what this is, and unfortunately, it doesn't mean that you still can't connect to other human beings or have meaningful conversations with them, or sometimes if we disagree or whatever. But social media just does that. It's like it thrives on disagreement and on negative feedback and negative attention.
Yep.
And this is part of the reason why I'm Yoko Ono to the Warax, even though she has much better hair. Let's face it. Let's just face it. She really does. She has
I
better
kind
hair,
of
but
don't acknowledge ridiculous people anymore.
You're probably right.
I just like, hey, you know, you're talking about something and then somebody jumps in with this bad thing happened to me and you should feel bad because you said this thing. And it's like, I don't. I'm going to be super honest with you. I don't feel bad. I'm sorry that happened to you. whatever it is. I'm sorry that your dad left. I'm sorry that, you know, like whatever it is.
Sorry you don't like exercise.
I don't feel bad for you because, like all people, I care about my world. And if you acknowledge that you care about your world, we'll all be much happier. And this is like something my dad told me ages ago. And at the time I thought it was harsh. And now I give everybody the same advice. No one cares about you. And I don't mean this in a bad way. I don't mean this in a bad way. But, you know, Bryce and I are friends. We've been friends for a long time.
Not on Twitter, apparently.
I
Wait a
have-
minute.
Is it a real friendship?
I have his back if he needs something. I believe he has my back if I need something. That being said, you know, when Bryce goes home, he's not thinking about me. He's thinking about his kids, his wife, any, you know, problems he has with his car, problems he has with his house, what he's got to get done for work. You know, is his wife mad at him today? Is she happy with him today? Like, these are all the things he's thinking about. Just like those are all the things you're thinking about. Just like those are all the things you're thinking about. And same here. And so
I'm just thinking about my hair, honestly. Let's just face it. But anyway, please continue.
people get wrapped into social media because they have the false belief that anyone gives a shit. Like, you say something interesting, I'm interested. Like, I want to hear what you have to say because it's interesting, it makes me think, it affects my world. But if you're trying to drag me into some kind of like, feel sorry for you, feel sorry for everyone, like, even if I hit you with a platitude, which is not my way, but even if I hit you with a platitude, I just want you to know I don't really care because I have my own problems. And again, I know that sounds harsh, but if we're really honest with ourselves, that is the reality. It's the same reason why people that are always victims, they're always like, oh, this bad thing happened to me, and oh, I can't, they can never get ahead of their lives. You start to avoid those people because it's exhausting.
That's a drain.
You know, like I helped somebody once, cool. I helped somebody twice, cool. When it's like number 8, like I'm not helping you anymore, like because it's a waste of my time. You are the problem. Like you have to acknowledge that. And I think when you realize no one cares, it's incredibly freeing. It takes away a lot of problems. Like, oh, mom thinks I should be doing this for a career. I don't care. Oh, Matt doesn't like the comment that I made because he feels this other way. Cool, I respect you, but I don't care. I'll think about it for a minute because I respect you.
It's not going to dissolve your world, right?
It's not going to dissolve my world, you know, and that's true for everybody. And like when you start getting wrapped up in I need to get these comments or I need these people to say I'm good or I need to like it just like it's a waste of your life.
I mean, I feel like we're just layering what you had said before, just the idea of, I mean, it's on a personal level and it's on a community level. Like personal level, if we all just focused on ourselves and being the best versions of ourselves, we'd all be better. It's the same with communities. Like why did community work so well before social media? Because we were all focusing on our 3 meters in front of us that we could. Now, social media, the internet has made it to where everybody is accessible and connected to everyone. So everybody's like reach or like circle is growing.
Yeah.
So now everybody thinks that they've got to take care of so much more or
Yeah.
affect so much more, and it becomes it's unattainable. You know, it's
Unsustainable.
unsustainable. You know, where it's like that's where it comes back to that woke, you know, or that completely enlightened person where you've gotten to the other side where you're like, I don't need to care about this stuff across the world. Like, you think about how many people are getting off social media now.
Yeah.
You know, I love it. I'm not on Facebook anymore.
Because
They're retreating back to their community.
you have to take care of your community, and you can take care of it. You can't take care of people
Can't
you
take care of
don't
anything.
know. Yeah, you can't take care of people you don't know. It's true.
It's an anchor. Social media can become an anchor if you let it. And like when you really think about what's important, like the things that probably all of us value are the times we took action somewhere, whatever it was, in the service, out of the service, working on a business, working on a film, working on a nonprofit, working on, you know, like a hobby at home. Like action is what defines your life. And social media is all about making comments to show that you're better, smarter, more sarcastic, funnier, whatever it is than everyone else. It's like, let's get this kind of status by talking. And I'm not like talking is important, having good conversations is important, but I would much rather have this conversation than, and even if every time we were talking, you guys were like, no, I think you're wrong because of X, Y, Z. I would much rather have that conversation. Even if at the end of it, I felt like, man, I really have to rethink some things than get into some pissing match with somebody that can't conjugate verbs because I need to show someone.
Yeah, or isn't even, yeah, is so far removed from my daily or my life, like life cycle.
Yeah.
You know, like in a different country, in a different community, in a different subset of like, God, that dude's opinion is doing nothing for my health and well-being, either up or down. You know, of like it's not. He plays no part in it. So why am I putting so much of
Yeah, I think
on
I think it actually holds you back from reality. I used to argue a lot, especially on Facebook. I'd have like these big, drawn-out conversations, and now it's like I look at, like this isn't going to be worth the hour of constantly checking my phone so I can respond to whoever because I have things I have to do that actually could have value for me, for the community, for my friends, for my family. Like, you know, whatever I put out on social media, if it's not a well thought out presentation of either comedy or information, I'm not super interested in doing it.
Oh, it's a tool, right? Like I think that being
Did you just call me a
creature.
tool?
No, well, yes, I did. I said we're all tools. You know, all of us who are of the internet, right? No,
Men are tools.
men are tools. Men are canceled.
No, I meant like in the in the cosmic way. You know, so it's an old Jerry Seinfeld joke. I'm sorry, I really dated myself now.
Social media is a means to an end, and I think that people get confused about that. A lot of people who I interacted with as the Warax, you know, they were totally wrapped up in like tweets as performance, right? And like wokeness as like a demonstration of like how superior they are, and that they have the right ideas, and that their ideas are always right and most right. And if you don't believe this, then you know, like you're bad. Like
You're evil.
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're a Nazi. You know,
Yeah.
like, and that's crazy, right?
Yep.
And I think that there is real value in social media, right? And I think that it.
We met because of social media.
Yeah, she and I met because of social media. I know you guys
Yeah.
through social media. We're having this conversation because social media is a tool that can connect people.
I appreciate social media a lot. I just don't take it as seriously as
And that's good
You're
because
good.
that's healthy.
That is a good mental
Like,
health
that's the correct
strategy
use of it.
right there.
I feel like we don't have the means to be able to segment social media like it should be. I should be able to go on Facebook and literally filter everybody that if I wanted to filter only people that lived in or that said they lived in Raleigh, North Carolina, I should be able to do that. I should be able to only fill my feed on Facebook with people that live in my community. And that's where it would really make a better difference in being able to use social media, because then at least I'm only seeing information, or I'm only potentially at first seeing information from people who live here. Now I can create other filters to communicate with other individuals or groups or people that live at other places.
Again, though, this is where, you know, I did not look at social the same way until I really started getting deep into advertising, you know, but if you're using social, any social, you are the product. Social media is an advertising delivery device. That is what it is. You don't think about it that way because you're not in that world.
Yeah.
But the behaviors that you show on social allow people like me to identify traits that social has identified in you. Based on what you share, what you say, social identifies how much money you make, identifies whether you're right, left, middle, libertarian, whatever, what sports you like, whether you were military. Like, it identifies all of these things, stores the information. Facebook knows more about you than probably anybody on earth, except for maybe Google. It's an argument between those two. That allows people like me to deliver very specific ads. You know, like we put out a shirt that is, kind of based on Charlie Brown. You know, like the concept is Charlie Brown all grown up, and he's a post-apocalyptic Charlie Brown. It's a cool shirt. I really dig it. He's a personal hero of mine. Like, we can target, like, you know, you believe in Second Amendment, you like Charlie Brown, you're loosely connected to our page in some way. Either you or like a friend is connected to our page, and we can get a very specific profile of who you are so that we're advertising to the right people. You're the product. If you're using social, you are an advertising delivery mechanism.
Or it's me investigating you. Let's face
I like
it.
that.
What's that?
Or it's me investigating you. Let's
It's,
face it.
yeah,
you
it's
know?
just
basically the same thing.
I'm assuming you're using the same means to,
We investigate. If you're going to investigate people, yeah, you have to have certain filters for what
Yeah.
you do, what you look for. How did we find out who did MH17, right? Who shut down the Boeing? You have filters
Yeah.
on the information.
which ties us back to privacy is dead.
Right? Yeah, it's just over. Yeah,
And
it's.
so for you, how did you get? I mean, that's a skill you just said you develop over time of like learning how to use.
It's a skill. I mean, we teach workshops at Bellingcat, so we teach people how to, start something.
Can we go to a workshop?
I'm sure you could.
In exchange for money. Yeah.
In
It's,
exchange for
uh,
goods and services.
in exchange for money, but it's they do great workshops. I mean, I personally came on board at Bellingcat as a storyteller because the thing is with open source data is that you have to tell a story, and a lot of researchers are obsessive and they're very passionate about the work, but they don't have the
They're not
tools to
Yeah,
tell.
right.
Yeah.
So they come with all just like the.
They just kind
if
of-
they just left that there.
That was a nice way of saying they can't write.
Hmm.
She's like,
No,
you
I
don't
know.
have the tools.
I
to-"
never. I mean,
You have to have a
sometimes.
narrative, right? You have to have a story.
Even,
to tell
sometimes
people.
even
They
when
can
you
find
can
facts.
write,
Right.
you don't
Sometimes
know what
boring
the
as
story
shit.
is, right? Sometimes even I don't know what the
Put
story
that
is.
together, right?
I think it's for me it was about storytelling, and then I got into the more granular aspects of it. Like for example, like what is like information leakage, which sounds like a weird
That
like
sounds
term.
really
It sounds really weird.
It sounds
to
like you
say
just
that.
ate those wow
Yeah.
chips.
Yeah, exactly. The first time I saw that in a report, I was like, leakage, this is, and they were like, no, it's a technical term. I was like, okay.
Side effects of taking
So, for
Sarah
example,
are information leakage.
If you have an anonymous Twitter account, I can, try to like log into it, and then it shows me,
I
for
don't
example.
because I'm an adult.
Well, if I really wanted to investigate you, for example, and I'm sure people did
Get your notebooks
actually.
up, kids.
Absolutely.
I check to see what phone number is it tied to, what is the email address it's tied to, and then I start from there. And that's you tried to log into that account. You tried to log into that account, and it's like, did you forget your password? Well, here's what we can do about it. And I'm looking at that page, and I'm like, okay. Well, I see that this is tied to a certain email. Maybe there's some digits in the phone number I can pick up, and then it goes from there. So it's
Spies. Yeah, they're spies. I mean, it's like, it really is.
It
like
is
soul-
not spying.
It is
It is-
similar to spying.
It is similar, but the spies are behind on this, especially Russian spies are behind on this. Once again, the
How do you know
Carter
so much about Russian spies?
Because it's their job.
Because-
She investigates them.
because-
What about the GRU?
The GRU had 300 cars registered to one address
Yeah.
in Moscow, and all you have to do is look at a traffic database. And in Russia, OPSEC is so bad in Russia that you have so much corruption that people just sell these databases, right? And most of the time, people use them for like non-spy means. They just want to find out where their ex-husband is living, so they can hit them up for alimony or whatever. But if you get this database and you check out all of these addresses that are tied to this, registrations that are tied to this one address, you're just like, oh, okay, well, here's your headquarters of your spies, you know? So the spies are actually behind on this. And after, they've adopted, I think, new policies now in Russia on social media, like soldiers on social media, as well as just how they manage information and how they, how they do their accounting. Because one Russian spy, and I don't even think we did this, but there was a spy who got, outed in the EU. He was a Russian spy because he had to submit a form for his, his taxi receipt. So there's a spy accountant somewhere going like,
Finance
hey,
screws
asshole, you either you submit this receipt or I fuck you. And he got caught.
Not in the way that you would like.
Not in the way that he would like. This is like some very, and I've dealt with Russian
I
accountants.
believe you said her name was Olga.
That's the
Sarah Day and Spy S1.
That is the stereotype. It's like big Olga, big angry Olga at that accounting department who just wants to make your life hell, and she will over a seat.
Yep.
And of course, but that's poor OPSEC, right?
I didn't get paid for 6 months once in the military
Because of Olga.
and Olga had me on T status even though I was at my unit. And
Perfect.
Great.
no one could change it. It was one of those, I was like, can anyone help me here?
No.
It was like,
You're like, no.
you're going to have to go all the way up to the top of this. Like,
We're gonna have to send you to the Pentagon.
here's the president's direct line. I'm like, please pay me. I'm running out of money.
Very hungry.
Yeah, I was living on credit cards. It was a good time. But yeah,
Yeah. So,
Olga.
But the spies are behind this technology right now. I mean, I'm sure they're now
Well, they're watching
catching
this
up.
right now.
I mean, they are watching us right
In real
now. But once again, it's just it's a different playing field, and I have no idea what we were talking about before then. No clue, but yeah. So
So talk about, the Warax is dead.
long
Do you,
live the
do you
Warax.
ever see the Warax putting his tights on again? And
Yeah, I think you can put on the Warax tights again. I was talking, I had
Friday
a,
night.
yeah, right? Had an idea the other day.
Traveling.
Maybe I'll come back and do like a really serious rant in like a stolen tank from the
Yeah.
highway. This Veterans Day, my front-facing camera,
Yeah.
talking about like what all veterans believe. I think it would still be fun to come back and do some one-off tweets like that if the opportunity presents itself.
Yep.
And your banana boxers.
In my banana boxes, yeah.
I like the banana boxers.
All right.
But so the podcast is called Warax.
Warax and Natasha podcast.
So you still
right?
there's still some kind of like remembrance.
You're
of
You're
Warax.
still connected.
I'm still connected to it, right? Like I think that, well, I'm like emotionally connected to it. That was important to me. I don't want to completely walk away from it, and I understand that it's still important to some people.
Yeah.
And as long as there are people who are generating some kind of value out of what I'm doing, then that's important to me to continue to do that. So I don't want to walk away from it. And the Warax and Natasha angle is.
Let's pause, and then he'll reset, and then we'll hit the podcast and close up.
Great. Yeah, so the Warax and Natasha podcast, the name is basically just us leaning into people who were accusing she and I of being Russian agents, right?
Fuck those people, honestly.
Using
If
that
you did
platform.
that,
You built a platform to help deal, with a particular part of your life, which then you saw going away that you didn't want to. So rather than stay that course, you shifted
Adjusted.
now into something that's worked out positive. But you still want to use that same, like we talked about. You got to have the angle. You got to have something to capture people's attention. And in this, I think it's a perfect use of notoriety, if you will.
Yeah, we built this platform, and how wouldn't I use it, right? So as long as people continue giving us positive feedback about it, as long as people want to keep coming onto the show and talking to us, we'll keep doing
So
it.
talk about the podcast. What do you guys hit on the podcast? What are the discussions like?
So a lot of it's actually about this because the kind of things that we're talking about today. Because my core complaint still is that conversation and dialogue in this country is nuts. Like it's just off the rails. We aren't able to have real conversations anymore. We get drowned out, like thoughtful, meaningful conversation is drowned out by hyper polarized sound bites about shit that just doesn't matter. Emotion,
It's
right?
so canned, or it's just so like
Corny.
fake.
It's fake.
And you're like, oh, that was not a real conversation.
And the shit that matters also gets buried. That's the problem,
That's
right? That's why we want to talk about shit that matters on our podcast. We try to. I'm a big fan of George Lakoff. I don't know if you know his work, but he, when Trump got elected, and a lot of people were like losing their minds, and I of course I knew that Trump was getting elected. And I was going around New York.
Because you're a Russian spy.
Well,
the
obviously,
payroll.
I knew that
Saw the money
Vladimir
allocated to President
Vladimirovich
Trump.
had that in the bag. No, not really, but I was going around editors to New York City. A lot of white male editors. Sorry, no offense, guys, but some white male
we
editors
do a
are
lot of dumb stuff. It's okay.
seriously,
Cancel.
they have a problem with other perspectives. Let's just to put it mildly. And what I was saying, hey, I think this guy's gonna get elected. I think there's a lot of stuff going on in this country that is going to get this dude elected. And they were like, oh, hell no, you're just a crazy ass paranoid person.
Do you think it's because they live, not that everybody doesn't live in a bubble. I'm not attacking
Everybody
people.
lives in a bubble
But
to
if
some extent.
you are a New York City, LA editor, and that is your world, you probably know no one that voted for the president.
Probably.
That's fair.
And it's probably true. The thing that, to go back to something that we do on the podcast, is that when he got elected, and when I was going, you bitches, I told you this was going to happen. And they were like, well, whatever, fuck you, Natalia, we're going to get back to doing our shit. Fine, whatever. I'm not bitter at all. You can tell that I'm not. But I discovered the work
Clearly
of...
she's moved on.
I've moved on. I've discovered the work of George Lakoff, who talks about how you can't reach people with facts most of the time. You really just can't. If you're going to sit there and say A, and I'm going to say no, but actually this history book says B, people believe what they want to believe. That has always been true. It's been true before social media.
Yep.
But you can reach people with empathy and with caring about them as human beings. And as finding common ground
I
in
think that
unusual...
was Obama's skill. I think that's why he resonated with so many people. Is I think whether it was real or not, only he knows.
Emotionally connected. Yeah,
But
he and Michelle both emotionally connected.
Emotionally
with people.
connected with people.
Yeah, and I think that that's very important. I think that's very important. Regardless of I'm not gonna say regardless of politics. I'm like a flaming liberal, right? I'm not going to say
President Bush as well, right? President George W. Bush, very.
It's true. Yeah, he could do that. He had that emotional connection. I feel like the current president, people can hate me all they want. I think he's a narcissist. I don't think he has that skill. I think he taps into something much darker.
He's successful at connecting with anger.
With anger,
and
yeah. And with resentment. So before I go down that black hole, and I'm not going to do it here right now, but let me just say that basically my understanding of human connection is that, once again, facts don't matter as much as feelings, actually. And Ben Shapiro is wrong when he says facts don't care about your feelings. I think feelings are what matter. And I think that connecting to people on an emotional level, maybe that's kind of like a pussy thing, like, it's women do it, so it's like, men can't. Men do connect to other men on an emotional level. And I think that's
Certainly.
I think that's part of why we launched this podcast, but also just to, distract Matt from his divorce and like distract me from like I'm still, we're just.
It's a mess.
It's he's not a mess.
Narratives are what matters, I think, right? Like, if you're able to take things that are true, right?
Yep.
And then you present them in a way that tells like a compelling story, then that is the way that you can sway people.
I find it very interesting because I read a lot. Like, I spend a lot of time trying very hard to know what's going on with the world. And there are many issues that I feel like I am ill-suited to make commentary on, and then which forces me to go out and do, a lot of times I have
Overload.
a lot of times I have to report on stuff that, like today, some things happened today. I'm not going to get into it because these shows are not happening in a timely manner, so the details don't matter. But today I was reading about like nuclear proliferation, getting myself, up to snuff on like the latest things that have occurred over the last few months, because that's not my area of expertise, but I need to know something. I spent hours doing that today. People, I guarantee by the time that I sit back down in front of my computer today, there will be a narrative about the president's decisions being right and the president's decisions being wrong by the two sides, that almost every person on social media is going to parrot. And I know that 90% of them have no idea what they're talking about. And it's not because I'm saying like I'm an expert. I'm saying I put time into this on a daily basis, like what is going on with the world. And every day there is something I need to learn more about. But yet there's always two stories that come out. There's almost never more than these two stories. And so I find it interesting how quickly the machine.
That's the problem with this country, though, right? Because we have a two-party system, but the two-party system has come to not represent the full spectrum of Americans, right? I mean, I think
We're failing to recognize the other parties that are
the other
now.
parties.
Yeah, but that's
I don't know about the other parties
That's our
necessarily,
fault.
but
It's all our fault, though.
whose fault is it now? I don't know.
The voter. The individual voter. This is like, no matter what anyone complains about, like the GOP could be, completely shady. The Democratic Party could be completely shady, but we can vote every single one of them out of office. So the fact that we are choosing as a collective to not be educated, to not make nuanced decisions on who we are electing based on their performance, because we know everything there is to know about, in my case, the New England Patriots, but nothing about the voting record of, our elected representatives. That's our fault.
Well, it's because there's also an anti-intellectual culture in this country, like, oh, it's gay to read books or whatever, or you're a pussy if you're a nerd. Like, I think that is part of it. I think that underfunding public schools is part of it, and I think gerrymandering is a big part of it. I think that if you carve up districts a certain way, then it doesn't matter who you vote for, because your district is so weird. And we've seen this happening in the South, for example.
Yeah,
there's systemic problems
It also
here.
happens in Maryland. It also happens in Massachusetts. It also happens in New York. And I know that there's individual states that are worse than others, but again, fundamentally, like those are just examples of shady things that we should not accept. I don't want gerrymandering regardless of whether my guy wins or not. I think it's bad. That being said, it's always happened. So what's different about it now than 4 years ago? Like really nothing. So is that the problem, or is it the fact that we are not engaged and are not demanding more? We used to demand. I mean, if you watch the Republican debate between Ronald Reagan and George Herbert Walker Bush, it was such an intellectual conversation. Like you sat there and you went, man, both of these guys are very intelligent. Like they have well thought out policies. I am inspired by the direction that they're going. And then you watch, this last debate, or even the Democratic debates, that occurred. I mean, there were some moments that were decent, but on the whole, it was like, what is this?
I blame reality TV.
Yeah.
I really do.
But again, you can blame.
I want something to blame. Please give this to me.
You can blame outside forces. I have trouble accepting that because, I am responsible for my actions. I am responsible for my worldview. You're responsible for your actions. Like if I murder somebody, I know everyone likes to, well, he did it because, this girl dumped him, or he did it because, like he had post-traumatic stress, or he did it no, you're a fucking murderer.
You did it because you made a choice.
You
right?
made a choice. So if I choose to vote for the president, or I choose to vote for, Gary Johnson or Elizabeth Warren or whatever, I'm making a choice. Now, if none of these choices are acceptable, there is a process to fix that. I can, put together a campaign behind somebody that I believe in. I can run myself. No, there is a process. Nobody wants to put work into the process. They want to complain about the process, but not put any work into it, and then be shocked when we get a crappy result or a result we don't like. This is our fault. And when you're blaming other people and you're not involved.
I think you just hit on the paradox that John Milton explored in Paradise Lost, where it's is there free will?
That's what I was going to.
Yeah, obviously.
Clearly,
We talked about that beforehand.
But is there free will, or is God just in charge of everything? Is the game rigged? And that's a paradox that Milton did not ultimately solve. All he could say was, we are a story that the universe is telling itself.
It's a little column A and a little column B according to science thus far.
Yes, but
Where individuals are predisposed to believe certain things. For example, there's evidence, based on research, not my research on Google, but
the
on
research that you
actual
conducted
research.
your
research in your labs. Let's.
That people tend to be more conservative when they are when they worry more about security, and that is a thing that you're born with. That is a hereditary thing that is part of evolution. If you're a person that thinks about security, you tend to be a more conservative person. If you're a person that worries more about the injustice, a fair kind of look for everybody, you tend to be more democratic, and both of those things carry baggage, right? So people that are Democrats tend to be more willing to overlook laws and go to places of aggression or violence in order to achieve what they view as justice. And people that are conservative have a tendency to overlook injustice in order to maintain the rule of law. These are things that you're predisposed with genetically. Now, that doesn't mean that people can't make different decisions about who they vote for based on evidence, but there is a certain, predisposition to certain things, which makes sense. Those are ways that we have survived, so.
I don't know about any of that, but I think that what you're talking about in general makes sense, right? That all of these things that we look at and we think this is the cause of it, right? That we're in a messed up situation because of gerrymandering, or because of or because of her hair, or because she broke up the Warax.
I broke up the Beatles.
It's all symptoms, right? Like we're looking at symptoms and thinking that they're causes, and that's not correct. I think that you're correct in saying that no, all of this is symptoms of a disease, and the disease is people don't give a shit.
Don't care.
Right? They don't care. What they want is what's safe and familiar and expedient. And the reason that we levitate towards the news outlets that we already agree with is because it saves us the effort of doing the research, actually being educated on the topic, and coming up with something to say.
Yep.
And that's for better or worse, that's why narratives matter so much, and that's why it's so important. I think.
Stories.
Yeah, I think, and she thinks, and it sounds like we all think that it's important to have conversations, right? And actually figure out, what is true, what is right, what is the correct path.
Yeah.
And I think that's the place that we all need to be moving towards.
And you guys have guests on the show, or is it?
We have guests.
Yeah. So I mean, that's an even better part of this. Like, and I've only recently discovered this myself, but I mean, you think of podcasting. You just think of the podcasting itself. It used to be something that was really hard to do. You used to have recording
Studio.
equipment, like mics and all this kind of stuff, and it was really scary. What's that? 4 cameras.
Mini leather couches.
Leather couches.
Luxurious leisure.
But you also it had to have this like opening credit, this like opening theme music and like sponsors. Like,
It's Wayne's World. It's party
but thanks to
It's
Anchor.
excellent. Sorry.
No, I love
I know
it.
you're making
I
a
love
serious
it.
point. Hey, this guy sawed through my bathroom.
we just have to bring that up every
single
episode.
episode.
I destroyed Nick's house.
Wait, what?
Yeah. Well,
Come back to that
Well,
offline.
okay, yeah, please.
this is the
Later.
last episode.
He's a great destroyer of bathrooms.
That's good.
But having something like the platform of podcasts become more accessible to more people. Like I use Anchor as my podcasting platform. You guys use, what was it?
We use, what is it called?
SoundCloud.
SoundCloud.
Yeah.
So there's another great one. I mean, we are essentially finding those ways that we can create these micro conversations. And this is a great example of and the reason we wanted to start this was to bring opposing views or just all different types of views out there to be able to come and have an in-person conversation or a much more personal conversation than just like a thread on Facebook.
Yeah, some shit talking back and forth. Two heads screaming at each other on cable news, right?
And to have something like podcasting available, I mean, just more and more people, it's really cool to see different voices out there creating content to create more dialogue for us in areas other than left and right. Like you guys saw this middle ground that needed to be covered and are doing something about covering that middle ground.
Yeah, I mean, I think
that's
our
really
intention
cool.
here, it's not even necessarily to have political conversations. Like,
It's just to
we've had a
create
lot of cool
conversation.
people. We've had people from Hollywood here. We have authors. We've got a lot of different people. And the conversations are not typically going to be political, but, it's just more about like your experiences and kind of different worldviews and just put them out.
Spies. Fucking
So
spies.
we have been going for a little while because you guys have been interesting. We're gonna have to
thanks.
wrap it up, but before we wrap it up, maybe like a couple pieces of advice or thoughts or
Yeah.
closing comments from the two of you about how people can anything
Yeah, I would say-
that you feel anything that you have for them.
As a Russian spy involved in
I speak for all Russian spies.
who's
for all
involved in
Soviet.
story, finding out true stories. What advice do you have for people for posting stuff on the intrawebs?
Care about your audience. You have to emotionally connect. Once again, emotions are important.
Yep.
Do you guys watch Fleabag at all on Amazon?
It's on my to-do list, but I haven't done it yet.
So there's a great line from Fleabag, and I want to quote it here. It's when Fleabag, the main character, she's kind of young and cynical. She's having a drink with Kristen Scott Thomas's character, who's older and more experienced, and Fleabag tells her, I hate people, and she's like, hey, back up. People are all we have. People are all we have. So I would just like to reiterate that people are all we have.
That is
She's a you. I thought she was
animals.
more of a me, but she's more of a you.
I mean, like that statement right there. I mean, I'm really glad. very glad you said that, because that whole I hate people narrative is really strong right now, especially in the veteran world.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So
Matthew.
from Twitter creating.
Speaking for all veterans.
Speaking for all people who would like to tweet, and I think like really maybe what I could do would be most valuable here is because this is still happening, where people are creating these anonymous, military accounts, and they're everywhere.
It's jumping the shark now.
Right?
The first 4 or 5 were pretty good, and now it's like.
Look, I don't want to drag these guys, okay? Like, I understand the position they're in, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of these people, mostly I see it from like left side of the political spectrum, where they're coming forward and they're saying like, no, my experience in the military is different from like the prevailing narrative, right? And I respect that. And if they want to do that, that's cool. My advice to them is to recognize that there is no such thing as anonymity, all right? And to be responsible for everything that you're saying. And to make sure that if you're going to put something out there, that it's something that you would actually say in person and have attached to your name. Because something that I see a lot are people who are saying things that, like, I imagine myself, like, I'm still a Marine, right? Marine Corps sergeant, and like, there's a responsibility,
we got
right?
it pumping in the background.
Yeah, it's
That's
great.
good. I like
Yeah,
that. I'm
that's a
glad
good
that came
soundtrack.
up, right?
Yeah.
And
I see people-
muffler problem too. So.
I dig all this. I see people say shit that is nuts, right? And that would
Nuts.
get people like jacked
Absolute-
up, like
nuts.
dragged in the sergeant major's office,
Yeah.
standing tall, like just getting your hair blown back, and probably killed, like actually executed, and buried in the quad. And I don't think that people should do that, right? Because you really can get caught, and you really will be held accountable. Part 2, people making shit up, right? If you served, that's cool, man. Like, you don't need to be some fire-breathing, like recon sniper dude to be respected and to have your opinion matter, right? I am not special. I was in the Marines for a couple of years. I was a sergeant. I like drove a tank around. That's it. Like, I'm not super high speed or anything like that, and that's fine. I'm proud of what I did. Other people should be proud of it too. Don't make shit up. You're gonna get caught. Don't do it.
I'm the same way.
And for the people that truly matters, they shouldn't matter to you.
No, they're not your friends. Like, nobody gives a shit about any of this stuff, right? So,
But for that matter, right? Like, I'm a standard issue infantryman. You're
Standard issue
tanker. But when I meet people, like I've been very fortunate to meet a bunch of Medal of Honor recipients, and they're amazing. Like, and luckily all of the guys that I've met are awesome. But if I met somebody that was a consistent jerk, regardless of the fact that he was a Medal of Honor recipient or whatever, you're still a dick.
Yeah,
man.
dickhead's a dickhead.
Like, a dickhead's a dickhead. Like, and the idea that the leeway is short, and it's shorter the older I get. I used to have a much longer kind of, he's this and he's that, now it's like, listen, man, like, I don't have time. I don't have time for
that crap.
I don't have time for this. Like, you're either cool or you're not cool. Like, and I don't want to invest time with people that are not cool, and I also don't want to, my mentor, the guy that has invested a lot of time in me, and I talk about him a lot, is Mark Gross from Oak Grove Technology. It's been very good to me. He's the first guy, he owns a government contracting firm, very successful. They do incredible work. And, I think he was a specialist in Germany. Like, he says all the time, like, I'm not cool. I didn't deploy, like, different generation, right? That guy's been amazing to me. His company's been amazing for the U.S. military and the U.S. government. He's not living his life backwards. He's not going, oh man, like, if only I had stayed in and been a E7 that could have deployed to, because it's dumb, but his contribution to society, whether you're talking about, his employees, the tax base he's provided, to the government, the contributions he's done in training for, the U.S. military and others, that's far more significant than what I've done thus far, you know? And like, and it can keep going. So I just think it's important, you know, I try to find the value in what people are providing. Like, what do you know? What can you teach me? You know, and I look to be surrounded by people that try to contribute. They don't have to even contribute to things I care about, you know, but they have to contribute. Like, if you're not contributing, I don't want to be around you because you're going to suck me into this negative space where like everything is a problem instead of, you know, I'm investing my time into this good thing because I care about, you know, whatever it is, carpentry, jujitsu, kids reading, business. Like, I don't care what it is. Chopping my bathroom in half.
Fucking up friends' bathrooms.
No, but
Yeah, I need to hear the full story. So I will get this.
Yeah, we'll
we'll
get this
tell
off,
you,
right?
we'll tell you later.
I think you're absolutely right. You know, I think that there's too much focus on negativity. We're all sucked into this worldview where like we hate everybody else, and all of our interactions are based around like, how can I trash this person, especially on Twitter.
Yeah.
Like so much of that, all the tweets that I look at, I'm looking at them like anything that's like hyper negative, I'm going right past it. I don't give a shit. I can't waste my time with that anymore.
so
Because
much,
it's just too much.
I'm telling you, like, so much of it goes away when you just don't engage. Nick, I think you're this. Cool. You know?
A dickhead's a dickhead is a good
true.
summation of this whole conversation. I feel like that makes me very happy that we've reached this.
So we've got 4 minutes left before Quez just starts punching people. Anything else?
I got nothing. I think we're good
Nothing.
here.
You think we think we did
I think
it?
we nailed it.
You think we?
I would like to point out that I picked out these socks.
Do you want to show the socks off and kind
Let me
of?
show them off a little bit.
I like these socks.
I don't think I have socks that
Look at that.
fancy.
Look at that.
I think that
Yeah.
you know, if we're gonna focus on positive things and positive vibes,
Yeah,
these
I'm
socks
just
are
now
a positive
realizing.
vibe.
I'm just now
So there's two
realizing he
socks.
kind of
Nice.
he's kind of got like fancy jeans and you know boat shoes or boot shoes or
You know,
These
these
are
are
good.
actually
Literally, he
Army.
just fell out of
Army
her
style.
mouth.
So this is you got
Yeah.
a U.S. Army boots. What do you think
Meanwhile,
about that?
Bryce just came away from climbing.
Rock climbing?
Yeah,
I'm wearing
that's it.
sneakers,
That's it.
so you know.
I can climb rocks in these shoes.
That's pretty dope.
All right, well,
I can walk in these.
we had a great time.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah,
This really was a
absolutely.
pleasure.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Hopefully, you guys come on again with some new topics in the future. And Bryce, with that, I believe we are ending. Leather
We're
talk.
sewing up the leather.
If you were to kill an animal and then skin it and then provide a dilute solution of tannic acid, you'd end up with leather. If you were then to stretch it over some wood and have some people sit down on it, we could probably have some.
Leather talk.
Thanks, guys.
Beautiful. Really. Beautiful.